It's Baxy's Musical Podcast.
Resistance is useless!
According to Rolling Stone magazine, Talking Heads were listed at number 100 of the greatest rock bands of all time. This is one of the reasons why one should never rely on Rolling Stone to give you good information about anything. This is the same magazine that put James Taylor at number 84. I mean, come on, James Taylor, please. But in every other list ever created, Talking Heads rank significantly higher, and they certainly would in my book, if I had one, and I don't. In fact, all you need to do is slap on Remain in Light or Fear of Music or Talking Heads 77 or watch the film Stop Making Sense one more time, and you'll find that these guys were freaking on fire. From 1977 to 1988, Talking Heads released 8 studio albums, 7 of which went gold or platinum. They released 2 live albums, including the soundtrack to arguably the greatest concert film ever released. They released 31 singles, 9 compilation albums, and were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2002. And I haven't even mentioned the Tom Tom Club, whose first album alone went gold in 1981 and has become one of the most sampled recordings in history. Chris has just released his new memoir called Remain in Love, Talking Heads, Tom Tom Club, and Tina. And he was ready to talk about everything from David Byrne to Brian Eno to the band to his 42-year marriage to Tina and a whole lot more. This is my conversation with Chris Frantz on Baxy's Musical Podcast. I literally ripped through the entire book over the last couple of days. Remain in Love, Talking Heads, Tom Tom Club, and Tina. And I absolutely loved it. And there's a couple of reasons for it. First of all, I like the fact that this isn't really just about the band, but this is really about the relationship and the love story you have with your wife, Tina Weymouth. And I think it's a beautiful story and a relationship that is clearly still very connected in spite of a lot of things that have gone on in your lives and throughout your career. I think it's a real testament to the strength of that relationship.
Well, thank you for that observation.
Well,
I was thinking about writing this book for 10 years, and I knew that I knew that Talking Heads would be a big attraction to it, to the readers. But I felt like I don't want to write a book just about the band. So anyway, it occurred to me that I have a really unique. I'm in a unique position being in a rock band with my wife, having success, going through a lot of twists and turns and ups and downs, and still coming out the other end, I guess you could say, intact. Our relationship is still intact and very, we get along great. She does correct me once in a while when I'm loading the dishwasher the wrong way.
That's just called marriage, Chris. That's just a part of it. It's a fascinating part of the story because, like I said, I mean, it's not so much that you guys were in a band. I think any relationship has obstacles, and to work in such close quarters with your wife or with your partner presents its own set of challenges, and to have to overcome that stuff after 42 years really says something about not only the kinds of people you are, but the way you connect with each other. And for all these, it's a remarkable story. It really, truly is.
Oh, well, thank you very much. I feel very fortunate as a man to have such a great woman in my life.
Now she's sitting right next to you, right? So
actually, I closed the door. Oh God, gonna get some barking. Here comes the FedEx man.
That's okay. That's okay. So about 30. This goes back. Gosh, I don't know, maybe like 30 years ago. I was working in Milwaukee, and I interviewed Jerry Harrison, which is his hometown, and
right.
So my perspective on your book is probably, I don't know, I don't want to say it's better than anybody else's because I can't say I know Jerry or I certainly have never talked to you or Tina, but The perspective I got from Jerry at the time was very much the same perspective I got from your book about the band. And, this is a guy that had been through the Modern Lovers with Jonathan Richman, and that was a real, difficult breakup for him. And now he's working with you guys and David Byrne. And it felt to me, from Jerry's perspective and now yours, that this was just a group of people that really wanted to play great music together. And the only thing preventing you from continuing to play the music that just about everybody in the world would love to hear is one guy. And that, from my perspective, that sounds like it has to be incredibly frustrating for all three of you. Do you still feel that way, or is it kind of like a bygones be bygones type of thing?
Well, I hope you noticed in the book I try to take the high road, and it is, and it was, and it probably always will be a very frustrating thing to deal with. But we've learned how to, I wouldn't say let bygones be bygones, but we've learned how to live with our situation, and I in no way do I want to sound like a victim or anything like that, because and I'm sure Jerry wouldn't either, nor Tina, but we've been very fortunate, and we've had success, and we've lived very cultural rich lives, and I guess you could say we're comfortable in our lives. But yeah, that type of thing will always be a pain in my ass.
But and I'm sure to be constantly hounded by the questions without being heard has also got to be somewhat of a pain in the ass too, because a lot of what people believe of the Talking Heads is also coming from one guy, and then it's, as you describe in the book, he takes a lot of the credit himself, when in fact a lot of what happened in this band, like any band really, these were all band decisions, band songs, band ideas. It was never a one man show.
Correct.
So
that has been maddening over the years, and was one reason I thought I should write this book, because there have been a few books written about Heads, but it's mostly they've relied on magazine articles and the British music press and stuff like that to get their information, which has always been skewed in the David Byrne direction. And I want to say, I still, despite all the problems, I still have great respect for David as an artist and also as a performer. That's why I worked with him in the first place. As I felt like, well, even though there were obvious, shall we say, eccentricities that might get in the way, I had a feeling, and I could feel in my artistic soul that this was something worth pursuing, working with David, and I might add, I also brought Jerry in for that reason, and Tina. So we had a musical chemistry that was just fantastic. That doesn't happen when you have one person in a room. That type of chemistry. It's a shared mutual chemistry, and I hope in this book I have conveyed that with some.
I think you made a very definitive statement in the book, exactly what the participation was from everybody, from and especially from you and Tina. Tina was not a natural born bass player. She didn't really play bass until she joined the band, but the backbone of that band, when you think about the kind of music that you heard in Remain and Light and Fear of Music, I mean, it's a danceable, groove-heavy band that could not happen if it hadn't been for the two of you. So to me, to even think of it, it's just David Byrne's project. I don't buy it, and I haven't bought it for the last 30 years when I first talked to Jerry, because he said the very same thing.
Yeah, it's David is a very compelling individual, and you know, he has a way of drawing attention to himself, and that in a frontman, that is a good thing.
Right.
And so it was very successful for us. But after, you know, I thought, oh, I shouldn't do this book. It'll somehow, queer any chance we have of a reunion or anything like that. But then I thought, nah, this reunion's not going to happen. David just isn't into it.
Yeah.
And also, I would like for people to know what the real legacy of Talking Heads is, what the real history of Talking Heads is. But as you pointed out, it's not just about that.
Yeah, you mentioned about your artistic sensibilities, and one of the things that I found really interesting personally was you talking about the Rhode Island School of Design. I grew up about 10 miles out of Providence in a little town, Rehoboth, Massachusetts. Very small town. So you're talking about neighborhoods and streets that I knew and I grew up with. And in fact, me and my friends would hang out on Thayer Street, pretending like our parents had enough money to send us to Brown or to the Rhode Island School of Design, for that matter. But those years at RISD were very, very formative for the three of you, and especially for you and Tina, not just as people, but as artists. What was that experience like, and how did that set you on that path?
Well, I was on a musical path before I even went to RISD, music and painting or sculpture, photography, filmmaking, all these things kind of go hand in hand. It's the same feeling that makes you want to create a painting as does make you want to create a song. And so I had been playing drums, and I just loved to play the drums. But I also loved painting. And when I went to RISD, I didn't bring my drums for a while, up until I guess I brought them the second year I was there, sophomore. But well, the whole RISD experience was one of being surrounded by very interesting people, and people that had ideas. Some people were more, like in music, you would call them keepers of the flame, like people who still play the blues but do it very well. You had some artists that were, stuck back in the Impressionist years, or the the years of the Surrealists or something like. They were kind of stuck back there. And then you had other people that were looking to the future, and attempting to be contemporary. And one thing we learned was that, it was instilled in us that it's okay to derive your ideas from somebody who's come before you, like Matisse or Picasso or Robert Rauschenberg. It's okay to derive your ideas from somebody like that, but you must add something to it that's unique unto yourself. Otherwise, you're just a copycat. So with Talking Heads, that was always, and also Tom Tom Club, that was always our manifesto. Yes, we love the Velvet Underground, and yes, we love James Brown and Al Green, but we have to add something. We can't just emulate them. We have to add. We can't just copy them. Not that we could ever really copy James Brown, if you catch my drift, but we were inspired by certain artists, and we use that as a platform to spring off of to go someplace else.
You talked about the early days. Well, when you left Providence and then moved to New York, and you talked about how important CBGB had been to you guys, and you even brought Hilly Crystal on stage with you during the Hall of Fame enshrinement. For people that don't know enough about Hilly and what he was all about, Describe what he was like, especially when you first started going to CBGB's and started to play there.
Well, uh, what I didn't know about Hilly at that time was he had a history of being a singer. In fact, he was a singer at he had performed like many times at places like Radio City Music Hall, and I didn't know that he had this musical background. I saw him as a club owner, and
Which would be an insult to most people, by the way.
yeah, yeah, but he was a very benevolent type of club owner, and when I first approached him about performing at CGB's, I knew there was an audition process, so I went to see him. Could we audition? And he said in his very deep baritone voice, "Well, I could put you on in front of the Ramones tomorrow night." And he said, "What kind of music do you play?" And I said, "Oh, we play in a style of our own." And he just really laughed at that because, of course, everybody likes to think they play in a style of their own. But I think we actually did.
You did. You absolutely did. It's interesting, though, in the book, and I'm sure it didn't feel like this at the time, but the way the book makes it feel, from the moment you guys started to play or open up for the Ramones, it was like from 0 to 60, all of a sudden, you're then touring the country with the Ramones and then Europe. It seemed like it was a pretty fast trajectory at that point for you guys. Is that an accurate assessment, or?
Yeah, once again, we were very fortunate. We were in the right place at the right time by moving to New York and by discovering the club CBGB's, where there was the scene was just beginning, really. Like I think I described, I went. One of the first people I saw there was Patti Smith, and there were maybe 25 people there, something like that.
Yeah.
And she just had one guitarist, Lenny Kaye, and was doing her thing, which is the beat poet thing she does over top of Lenny Kaye's guitar strumming, and it sent chills up and down my spine. It was so good.
Yeah.
And later it became even greater with her full band, but we were very lucky to arrive at that point in time. And then we saw the Ramones, then we saw Television, then we saw a very early version of Blondie, and even bands like Mink DeVille,
Right.
who were sort of keepers of the flame, you might say. But all the other bands were really pushing it and really pushing themselves to do something that had artistic importance or cultural importance. And it certainly wasn't about the money, because when you only have 25 people and half of them are your friends that got in for free, you're not making any money.
Right.
But it was just this, this thirst that we had to perform and to compose songs and then perform them in front of a live audience together. It was, and we felt, at least I felt, that the CBGB's was the equivalent of the Cavern Club, what that was, or the Star Club in
Right.
Hamburg was to the Beatles, and I was hoping we would find a place like that, and in CBGB's we did.
You also talked about some of the bands that wound up touring with you when you were headlining XTC, Dire Straits. And you also talked about the B-52s, which I thought was actually a very moving story about your relationship with that band. And they had some major tragedies in that band with Ricky Wilson dying. And I just thought that was a really moving chapter. I love the B-52s, but there was a part of it that was like, I just felt very sad for what had happened and thrilled that they came back with such great success.
They are an amazing band. I occasionally I go see them when they're performing nearby, and actually I always go see them when they're performing nearby, and they've still got it, But to actually, be on the road with them, and to at one point, Tina and I were part of the band for a short while.
Right.
It was, they're just an amazing band, very, very unique, and nobody can copy them. They're like I said, they are unique unto themselves.
I always thought that was like one of the greatest party bands there ever was. How could you not find that music infectious? And it goes back to especially those first two albums, which I just thought were just so much fun.
Yes, absolutely.
So I thought one of the best chapters in the book, after reading about all the issues with between you guys and David Byrne, that the Rocky Apollo Creed moment of the book was you and Tina creating the Tom Tom Club back in the 80s. To me, what incredible validation for the two of you to put together music that even today, all of these years later, you hear it sampled and used by everybody. It literally was one of those moments in the book where you just go, yes, screw that guy, the Tom Tom Club. So much fun.
Well, to us Talking Heads, to use a P-Funk term, Talking Heads was always the mothership, and no way we were going to abandon the mothership. But we, with Tom Tom Club, it was just like one of those. It was just one of those like it sounds like a cliche, but it was a magical period in time for us, and everything was just clicking and working really well. And Tina and I had never written songs, just the two of us, and so it was a challenge. It was a real challenge, but as you pointed out, it did pretty well.
I'd say it did very well. And correct me if I'm wrong, that was the first gold record you guys had together?
That's correct. Well, to be honest, we had a gold record in New Zealand for More Songs About Buildings and Food. I think a gold record in New Zealand was maybe 1,000 copies, something like that. But Tom Tom Club, well, now it's in the millions, up in the millions. But it sold right out of the box in America. It sold like 500,000, which was gold.
The band obviously had a very long working relationship with Brian Eno, and while it was productive, you described it as being a very demanding relationship. I don't know whether it was just purely professional or personal, but explain or what made that so demanding.
Well, it was actually Brian who was demanding, and it didn't start out that way. It started out very copacetic, and everything was very cool and easygoing, and everybody was very happy. And it wasn't really until the third album, Remain Light, that we did with Brian. Some people say it's the best record we ever did. It was at that point that I could just see he and David had made a solo album before that. Well, not a solo album, but an album they did together called My Life in the Bush of Ghosts. And we were, although I played on one track that was recorded in New York, the rest, they then moved the operation out to San Francisco and worked at a studio out there. And something went down between them. I don't know what it was, but something went down between them, and they really didn't want to see each other after that. But Tina and I, through psychology, managed to get everybody back together in the same room playing music again. And I don't know why, but it seemed like I do know why. We were coming up with stuff that was so inventive and so like swinging that David and Brian wanted to take the credit. Like they just wanted to take over the project and say it was their project. Brian Eno wanted the title of the album to be Remain in Light by Talking Heads and Brian Eno. So, so we had to have our manager talk to him and say, Brian, are you going to be able to tour behind this album? And Brian said, oh, no, I can never do that. I don't tour. And then our manager said, well, there's going to be like a 6-month promotional tour following this, and we can't call the album Talking Heads and Brian Eno if you're not going to be on the tour. So that was a very, very good way of putting it. But Brian he wanted to. We were cool with him being the 5th member of the band. That was fine.
Right.
But it's when he tried, he would demand every time he went back and forth across the Atlantic, it had to be on the Concorde, and we had to pay for it, and things like that.
Yeah.
It was just, like, I mean, no disrespect, because Brian Eno is a very, very multi-talented, deep thinker.
Right.
He really is. He's the real deal. But he has to, in my opinion, he has to learn how to cooperate with people.
Yeah. I probably am not the first one to tell you this, and I am sure I will not be the last person to tell you this. I remember seeing Stop Making Sense the first time on a big screen TV when someone jacked up the stereo, and we watched it one real late night, and I think we were in Warren, Rhode Island, watching this. I was home from college, and I watched it, and I was absolutely blown away by not how great the movie was or how great the performance was. I was blown away that I had taken all those years to realize what I had missed several times around in seeing you guys play. It was like, oh, why did I not go see the Talking Heads when I had the chance? What an incredible document to how great you guys were live. It's maybe one of the best concert films ever made.
You won't get any argument from me about that. And the great thing about Stop Making Sense is everybody involved, from not just the band, but also the cameraman and the lighting people and the direction and the editing. Everybody did a fantastic job. Everyone was, like, I guess you could say, at the top of their game, and it really shows. And I'm so glad it turned out so well. Because can you imagine having a movie about yourself that's like terrible or boring?
It happens. I'm sure it happens a hell of a lot more than either one of us are willing to believe.
Yeah,
but happens all the time. A few years ago, you guys were enshrined into the Hall of Fame. It was the first time you had played with David, and I think 18 years or whatever it had been. And then you talk about it in the book that it really was the last time that you had seen David Byrne, and he seemed to disappear in the woodwork. And despite your best efforts to reach out, never had any interest in getting back to you. If David Byrne were to suddenly change course and say, all right, I'm now ready to play with you and Tina and Jerry, after all of this that has gone on, would that be something you would still agree to?
Oh, yeah, I think we would welcome that. I mean, for no other reason than all those fans out there that would just love to see us play one more time or two more times. I would love that.
Yeah, I think everybody would, and not to put you on the spot, but I got $36.74 in my pocket. I'll give you right now if you can make that happen. Would that be enough, Chris?
You'll have to ask David.
But something tells me that probably wouldn't be enough.
That would be enough for me, Mike.
The name of the book, Remain in Love, Talking Heads, Tom Tom Club, and Tina. It is a wonderful, wonderful book, and I appreciate you joining me today and talking about it. Thank you so much, Chris.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So there you go. Chris Frantz's new book is on sale this week, and if you enjoyed the show, subscribe, share, review, tell all your friends, and you can email me at bax@rock102.com. Hope to see you next time on Baxy's Musical Podcast.